Morning and welcome to the second day of the main conference part of the conference. I'm very excited and happy. We start with our keynote by Pablo Fernandez. And Pablo is a professor at the University of Seville in Spain. And he is working on really exciting topics. So I checked, they've been working on service governance, quality of service, service level agreements, so all topics that are really at the heart of the ICSO conference. So Pablo, it's a very pleasure to have you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to start with a declaration of the more or less the idea that I have in the next talk. That is this famous quote by Einstein that if I had only 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. Perhaps I have very high stakes for goals of my talk. I don't try to save the world, but I will focus on the problem or the context of the thing more and a little bit of research tapas on our work in our past. No? So, well, first of all, I would like to just have a very glimpse, technical, very short technical and very high-level overview of how the services, in my opinion, are being built in the industry right now. So, well, we have passed in the last 2 decades of thinking about the service as something that typically is composed in a front end and a back end. Some people tend to think that everything is a service. Some people use the idea of service only for the microservice in the back end of the API. It is not clear the boundaries, but at the end of the day, you need to have a front end for the user and a back end for the logic. Then the next step forward is typically that you put the front end in some content delivery network or something like that you directly deploy into the client infrastructure, or you can have your mobile application in the market. And again, the backend is in a typically the different infrastructure that we call the backend that should be deployed and updated in a different rhythm than the front end. And the next evolution, of course, is to make more and more complex this backend into a, we could say, microservice architecture, or decomposing different components that should have different strategies to deploy, to scale, to be elastic. And the front end, again, is always defined in another layer. So, well, in this reality, because my opinion, and I will be very happy to discuss that in the discussion phase, I think we are more or less in the industry, if you think of the industry, more or less in this picture right now. So, well, the question here is, we are in in my opinion, very particular point in the history of our discipline, where we are facing a lot of transformative forces. So, the question I would like to discuss with all of you today is, which are the current transformative forces that affect service engineering and operation nowadays? So that's a in my opinion, super difficult question, because I always remember this metaphor of the fish that is swimming in the water. For the fish, the water doesn't exist because it's just a medium. But the actual water affects his life, his behavior, even for him, it doesn't exist. So the transformative forces typically are something invisible for us, and it's very easy to see when we look back into the past. In the hindsight, these were the transformation forces 20 years ago, but as you go into the current day, it's very, very, very hard. So I just try to name what I think are 3 of the transformative forces. It's a quite optimistic in my opinion, but I would like to see if you agree or not, of these 3 specific transformative forces that I'm going to mention today, in my opinion. Well, In order to contextualize, I think that, and also it was super interesting to see the perspective of Sumi yesterday with the context that he was explaining. I think we could all agree that now the infrastructure possibilities has expanded a lot, and with the idea of the continuum where you have the cloud, you have the fog, and you have the edge, you have very interesting possibilities on how to create services in this universe. When I'm talking about fog services, you could think about smart gateways, smart access points, or even intermediate data centers that you can have below the cloud. And when you talk about edge services, edge infrastructure, you can talk about sensors, IoT, IoTDT, as Sumi was proposing, or just smartphones. So in this context, in my opinion, one of the transformative forces that we are facing is how we have a purposive deployment. So how do we deal with this continuum? Where should we put our service? And also, should it be fixed? Should it be dynamic? How can we scale? How could be elastic and support? And many different approaches, super interesting approaches like osmotic or any other options deal with this idea of how can we take advantage of this pervasiveness in the infrastructure. The second transformative force, in my opinion, is that we see more and more, and perhaps let me try to hide this, if I can. This, no, like this, no. It's not possible to hide this. Move this and yeah, I think that's much better. Perfect. So we are facing more and more interdependence between the services. So we are, in my opinion, we are mimicking the supply chain of all other industries in our service world. And more we become interconnected with other services, and we provide services. So there's an added value chain that is evolving. And this service chaining, it's here to stay, and it's going to become more and more complex in the service that we are building. And of course, the third transformative force that I suppose all of us could agree is this abrupt appearance of AI components that are going to be used everywhere, and also in our services, because all the different possibilities that we have, not only just for final end users with the ChatGPT and that stuff, we can have a variety of APIs provided, for example, by OpenAI, to fine-tune the models and integrate it into our services by means of an API. Or even we can use in our local infrastructure, we can create models that we can integrate through APIs into our services. And this would be, in my opinion, very pervasive. And the problem with this kind of AI-based systems, as we have started to discuss, I suppose, everywhere in the community, is what about the accountability? What about the responsibility points in the chain? And I would like to call this transformative force as accountability illusion. I don't know. The AI system is resistant. Well, okay. So this idea of accountability illusion is that when you put these pieces into play, is not as deterministic to identify the key elements or the responsible elements for decision making, or if you base your decisions on something that the system tells you, and those decisions were not okay, who's the responsible if you put these components into the equation? Well, in this point, okay, let's see if it works. What are the risks? What are the risks? Well, first of all, purposive deployment could represent more data lakes, more data aggregation, and you can have billions of examples of this. I like this was, I think, very interesting of how an application that is used for fitness tracking was used to map the military bases of different parts of the world, or how can the APIs create really open APIs into the public with bad policies, create very terrible problems into very big companies, in telecom companies. That was a specific, very famous case of Optus. But not only that, if we start doing this purposive deployment, the aggregation of data, the magnitude of the aggregation of data sometimes is not easy to see. And I was really shocked when I was preparing. This estimation to me is really scary. Currently, it is estimated that online advertisement firms collect about 72 million of data points on each of us by the age of 13. Between your starting using internet when you're 13, that's the amount of data that will be aggregated on yourself. And that made you think if this is something that we really need to keep on without control, or how can we deal with this? The other transformative force about the service chaining, that could lead us to uncertainty in quality, capacity, because when you rely on other systems, what happened? Will happen that you could have very lots of problems with these are typical many examples of when some very useful piece of software fails that provide APIs to other systems, how everything collapses and has very important economic impact. And worst of all, it is not clear how to compensate when these kind of things happen, because it's very easy, the terms of service, but when something happens, it's not that clear how to pay back. No? And finally, accountability illusion that could lead us to this lack of responsibility, traceability on where is who's to blame for. And also, again, lots and lots of different examples on that. I highlight one example that was very recent about this very big real estate company in the States that started to use AI models to estimate the cost or the properties, and then they detect a problem on the estimation that the AI model was doing, and that represent a 300 million inventory write-down. That is not an easy thing to deal for. And also there are some other specific problems in companies that are starting to use hiring in the system that helps into the hiring process. Put that some AI in there, and that end up in suits. And actually the judges are really asking the companies to compensate because that bad use of the AI that generate a bias hiring policy, for example. So in this point, we, or at least myself, I start thinking in which point we are, what kind of tools, what kind of world are we creating? And I'm going to now show you the first of the three AI generated images that I'm going to use today. This first one, I tried to give a prompt about how the monkeys are playing with dangerous things. And the result was very shocking to me. The result was quite dramatic, actually. This was the result. It was very impressive by DALL-E 3 because he understood the dangerous toys as this. It is quite scary, the realism, but somehow very rapidly represent risk that we are taking in our world. So how can we deal with risks? Well, there could be many answers, and I hope that most of the people in this room are thinking on that all the time. My answer, or our answer, is to govern. And govern, it has a very interesting etymology. And it comes from the Greek Kubernetes or Kubernetes, that by the way is the same root from Kubernetes, the platform, that is to guide a ship. That's the origins of the word govern. And well, it's to affect the way that something happens and is done. And in our opinion, this idea of govern should be still put into a key position or key place in order to deal with these three things, these three transformative forces. But with two specific adjectives that I'm going to put it here. That is that we should have a service governance that is operational and a service governance that could be cross-organizational. Because service governance in the past, especially perhaps 2 decades ago, was very used in the context of regulation and also inside of the organizations. Our idea of service governance expands into a much more pragmatic point of view, and also stress the idea that should be cross-organizational, because if not, it's going to be, we will lack some of the challenges that appear in the transformative forces. So what we mean by operational? Well, we could all agree that in the context of now world, the industry is moving into the cycle, the develop cycle, where you, let's see if this works. Yeah. You build the system, you test it, well, you code first, then you construct the artifact, you test the artifacts, you release the artifacts, then deploy it, operate them, monitor how it's working, and then you plan the next phase and code, build, and this cycle goes again and again. I think is the norm, the standard now in the industry. So in this cycle, we need to incorporate how can we have a governance, operational governance ecosystem and operational governance policies. At the end of the day, these are tools, these are specs that we need to put into play. So I'm going to give you just an example of what these tools could, which is the goal of these tools, just to remind you, because this is a very high-level overview. For example, in the context of the building or coding phase, we need something that you could have an accountable development policies or practices that you can monitor, audit that these are doing okay. In the context of the test, you need to, apart from the typical unit test, integration test, you need to have also tests about your commitments or the relationship that you have with other organizations. You should put that into the testing phase. In the context of evolution, planning, etc., you need to have an analysis of how the features are working in terms of the integrations that you have, the economic, the market that you're involving on. In the context of operation, you need to have a way to operate, scale your systems, manage your systems in a way that is sensible to the commitments. So if you create new commitments, you should have an engine of operation that is ready to incorporate these commitments in an automated way. And in the context of how when you are deploying, before deploying, or to create an infrastructure ready, you need to have advanced tool to know in every moment which is the capacity that you have. And this is not a trivial thing, because as you rely on other infrastructure that doesn't depend on you, to understand the capacity, it's really a big deal. And not only that, with all the X as a service, you could grow your capacity or decrease your capacity taking economic decisions. So what's the equilibrium? The decision about economics and capacity based on your commitment is something that it is not trivial, but if you want to navigate in the world that we are facing, the organizations that better do the capacity, the service capacity analysis will be one of the leaders. So that's what we meant about a governance ecosystem, operational governance ecosystem, something that really puts tools into play to help the teams and the stakeholders. And on the other hand, what we mean by cross-organizationally? Well, as I said, many of the organizations will have their own life cycle of building, but they will be created relationship between the organizations, and each point in the chain will evolve independently on each other. So this we could see could create like a horizontal chain based on this idea of API economy, where you create more APIs that can other services use, and you rely on APIs from others. So you have consumers, prosumers, etc. But also you have the vertical dimension, because you typically deploy your system in other systems and you rely on other infrastructure that is also a service. So there's also this vertical chain derived from the idea of the SaaS. No? When you deploy into a Kubernetes in the AWS or in Google platform, you are reliant on the capabilities of that service that they are providing with the service level. So we have this bidirectional chain that is evolving. And in this reality, we need to have some models to explicitly say which are the commitments in each of the liaisons that are created, which are the limitations that each service imposed to the other, which are the pricing, which is the service level agreement that they agree. That should be explicit and automatically processable, because then you need to feed into your governance ecosystem so you can be aware of that. And unfortunately, most of those information and the commitments nowadays is human driven. It's human oriented. So you have a web page that you can read all the elements. It's very difficult to automatically extract that information that is fundamental if you want to have an advanced management of your commitments. And on the other hand, when these AI systems appear and comes into play, we could foresee that it will be very, very useful to create some accountability models that could create how to create explanations, how can we create traces, how can we check the outcomes from these AI models. And we propose that it could be interesting to create this idea of accountability groups among organizations, that all of those organizations share an idea or agree on an accountability rules that can help to distinguish the responsibles or which are the ways to check and to measure the accuracy and the precision of the AI based outcomes. Well, in this point, these are many different things, and I'm going to show you a little bit, as I said, about some research tapas, in the sense that we have faced a little bit of these challenges in our work in the last years, and I was really thinking a lot whether to tell the joke or not tell the joke, and finally I'm going to tell the joke. And that is, in this point, a joke that I'm going to credit Professor Broggi, because I heard from him that was a very funny joke about these two scientists that are sentenced to death and they go to them and they say, okay, which is your last wish, to one of them, and the first scientist said, I would like to gather all my colleagues and give them a very long talk of all my achievements and all my work in the past, and then they go to the second, kill me first. So that's, and I actually, just to check how is it possible for the AI models to grasp the humor, and try to create a human AI generated equivalent of the joke. I gave them to DALL-E 3, okay, this is a joke, generate an image, and it was quite scary, by the way. This is the representation of the joke that is very, very dark. So humor is really long in the achievements that the AI models, current AI models assess. So, well, our take is basically in three different areas. We have been working about this accountability awareness, and also about how can we start introducing tools for the service engineering to be aware of the commitments, and also how to create more reliable service chains. And in this point, I'd like to mention that, of course, this is a very large, what I'm going to show today is a teamwork by not only our organization, joined with Professor Ruiz and myself in Sevilla in the ISA group, but also many other organizations were involved. And I would like especially to mention the Professor Murillo in Extremadura, Professor Fox in Berkeley, and especially Professor Duska in Vienna, and that we were working all together in the things that I'm going to show you. Well, the first concerning the commitment, you cannot see, but commitments-aware service engineering, we face the question, how can we build commitment-aware services? And especially the implications in terms of CI, CD, testing, simulation, etc. And I would like to mention one specific work that was to how to create a framework of continuous evaluation of the QS in distributed applications. And it allows you to automatically run a very complex scenario of different nodes, different virtual mobiles, and run it into a very realistic way and see which is the outcomes. And you can run it continuously. In the context of how can we operate commitments-aware services, no, we were thinking about how can we achieve this elasticity idea, or how can we analyze the capacity of the services. And in this area, we like to stress this work that we done on in the context of microservice architecture, where you depend on external services that provide different qualities, different API plans, let's say, and you have to provide another API because you're in the middle of a chain. How can you analyze the capacity in these terms to estimate which is the best combination, the best offering that you can give, or the best buys of API keys that you could do with your providers? So this is a very preliminary work, but it's I think it's very promising in terms of it will be very helpful for organizations to actually operate in terms of creating new API keys or not, depending on the capacity need that you have. It mixes together the economics with the operational technology. In the context of accountability awareness, the question that we were thinking was, how can we have a reliable distributed coordination? And how can we create new tampering, non-tampering, or use non-tampering protocols in this distributed coordination, or an efficient way of creating this distributed analysis? And I would like to highlight this seminal work that on how to use a blockchain as a non-tampering platform to create very elastic analysis. So these kind of networks, blockchain networks, are very sensitive to the amount of transactions that you do into the chain. So if you try to use a lot of very frequent transactions, it's very easy to overload it. And in this work, we were trying to provide or to propose a flexible architecture that could automatically adapt the load to the blockchain depending on the analysis requirement. So you don't never surpass a certain threshold of capacity. And it's a very, in our opinion, an interesting idea to use the blockchain as a coordinated distributed analysis platform that cannot be tampered. And in this context as well, we also were thinking about how can we improve this traceability of responsibility, you know, in the account. In how can we interoperate when you share public and private resources, or if you want to have an accountability management, how do you do that? And also in this visionary paper, we try to propose this with a prototype. Also, some accountability model and accountability platform that could be distributed throughout the continuum. And finally, of this menu of tapas, in the reliable service chain area, we were one of the things that we were worried is how can we foster an open market of services? It's something typical. This is in my opinion, one of the holy grails that we were trying to achieve in many years ago, from the moments of UTDI until today. To create an open market of services is such a challenge. But well, one idea that we proposed was to use this sharing economy idea and principles to create a way of fostering this market of services that could be dynamically grow and have very flexible economic models to operate. And finally, how can we have reliable business liaisons? So how can we create, when you commit with other organizations, how can you deal with that? The idea of service level agreements, that was a seminal challenge that our group were facing for 20 years now. We were all the time thinking about non-functional properties and service level agreements. And in this case, I'd like to mention this work where we try to establish the like a taxonomy of possibilities that we could have when we change services in the context of AI, and when there are AI involved in the management of the service level agreement, which are the challenges that appear, and there could be some possibilities to ease the matching between, to create a global service level in all the chain that could be coordinated across the chain rather than in each of the steps. That's from the perspective of works that we would like to, I would like to mention. By any means, I would like to be comprehensive in terms that these are just little things that we believe, or some focus that we don't, but we are sure that commitments-aware service engineering spans much more of these research problems that we are facing. But I would like to also to complement these works to stress the importance of, you cannot read it, but the importance of operational specs and operational tooling, because these are papers, but in our group we have we always believe that it's very interesting to create tools that could be used by the industry, so you can somehow create a cycle where the industry can give you feedback and try to evolve in realistic challenges all the time. So I would like to highlight a couple of actions that we have done in the past. One of them is related with the OpenAPI specification, that is the industry standard for specifying RESTful services. We have led an extension for that OpenAPI spec that is, in our opinion, the most comprehensive. That is the SLA for OAI. There is an extension that allows you to specify the limits of each of the endpoints in a very light way. Because in the past, we tried to create very complex specs that nobody uses. So in our opinion, the success of OpenAPI spec is because it's very simple, very easy to use. So we create this very easy to use that just focus on quotas, rates, that is 100% of the APIs are concerned with that. But believe it or not, there's no standard way to specify that currently. And with this extension, the community, I think they engage it very nicely, and some companies are trying to incorporate it into their tools. And based on this extension, in order to show his usefulness of create these kind of extensions, we create a couple of tools. One of them is OS tools that speed up a lot the development of microservices in the context of Node.js, because it generates it's a very simple framework that allows you to just create the scaffolding of all the microservices, and you have all the security extensions to be very easy to use, and so the developer doesn't need to put any effort on that. And also to make use of the extension of the SLA for OAI, so you have a hard limit in your microservices automatically. So your developer doesn't need to do anything, and in a separate document, you specify the limits, and this framework takes into account. This is like a complement to the, could be also using parallel with a more API gateway approach where you have all the policies. So this is more a federated way of handling with the limits, or you can use both for maximum security. If somebody surpasses your API gateway, you have always a hard shield in the microservice. And I would like to stress that it's a very modular framework, so you can create new modules into the OS tools to if you create new extensions for OpenAPI. For example, extensions for testing or extensions for other kind of things. It could be very easy to plug in modules into the OS tool so you can leverage that information. In this context, I'm just going to mention, but I'm not going to go into detail because it's presented tomorrow in the demo. There's a demo, it's the SLA wizard that we create for automatic configuration of proxies of public proxies based on the information of SLA for AI. If you are interested, tomorrow my colleague Maria will give you lots of details. And I would like to finish with one platform that we have been working on for 6 years now, I think, that is Governify. That is one result that had lots and lots of reflections and experience in the industry, because we try to create a microservice framework that can be adapted to different domains, and basically it's like a generic audit platform. So you just gather evidences from APIs, and it helps you generate the dashboards to see if these evidences are okay with the goals that you have in mind. And just to give you a couple of examples of applications of Governify in this life cycle of the DevOps that I was presented, in the context of how can I assure that my developers follow some practices that I expressed, we use Governify instantiation that we call Bluejay, that allows you to gather information from GitHub, Travis, all the different tools that you use in the development process, Code Climate or any quality tools, gather all those evidences, and you could define team practices. That's as simple as, for example, one developer can only work in one thing at a time. So that's very simple practice, but you can automatically check it and see in a dashboard if the people is following that. Or every time I in the Kanban board, I say that something is done, that should be a pull request in the Git. Any kind of correlation of events that you think of in terms of practices, you can explicitly say that, put it into the tool, and have a dashboard that show you that is done or not. This is this accountability development. And another example concerning the service capacity is based on infrastructure plugins protocols like the one with Prometheus. Every Prometheus is a platform to analyze the availability of the different infrastructures. So we create a connection so you can harvest all the Prometheus metrics, and you could create complex rules of availability or complex service level agreement contracts, and automatically you have your dashboard that check if that SLAs that you're defining are okay or not. These are two examples of how to use Governify, but we have many others. If you're interested, you can go into the webpage. Well, as main takeaways for today, well, I hope in this point I've convinced you that service-oriented computing plays an important role in the transformations that we're facing. Second, that the important risks that we have are here to stay. I mean, we can look to another place, but the risks are there and are happening. And well, in our opinion, service governance could be a path to address these sub challenges. So I finished with two questions for you. You can ask me, you can answer that in the discussion phase or in the coffee tomorrow or in the party tonight. As in your opinion, which are the transformations that are being enabled or disabled by your research, your specific research in service or in the computer? And in your opinion, which idea, if you agree that is a path, which idea of service governance should be encouraged by our community? And I end up with a third generated image by an AI. I try to make the AI to put a representative image of the typical quote by Spider-Man that with great power comes great responsibility. And this is the outcome. And it's very interesting. It's a very nice metaphor because it's super stunning that create this metaphor out of nothing. Very realistic, but on the other hand, with 6 fingers. That is really, that is super powerful, but with hallucinations. So, actually, thank you very much.
Thank you for a fantastic keynote. Questions. The floor is open. Everyone's.
You're still stuck by the image.
Maybe I have a first icebreaker question. So you mentioned the cross-organizational commitments. Do you mean that like SLAs are typically then, let's say, committed by different services, but overall they have to reach a common goal? Do you also see like policies that span across multiple services? Is this also an issue?
Absolutely. I think I totally agree that the implications of having a reliable chain mean that somehow there should be any coordination. That could be an orchestrated coordination or a choreographed coordination. I'm aware that in the past, in the WSDL era, with WS reliability policy and gazillion standards, they tried to do that, but the problem, in my opinion, it was that it was very heavyweight specs, and it allows to extend a lot your tooling and ad hoc implementation sometimes, and so we clearly need to find another way. But the policy idea, I think, is good, but how can we materialize? And I think, for example, the way of doing that by creating very, very, very lightweight extensions to the open API spec that is really being used in everywhere could be very important. And at the end of the day, everybody wants their systems to be reliable and to guarantee things. And if you rely on other pieces, it's very reassuring to have a global understanding that there should be a quality. So if you only think about the quality in the direct connections that you have, and then you think that there's a chain involved, I think it's a very weak approach to guarantee. So the question to me would be, yes, I think that's a very interesting approach, but I don't know how is the best way to do it in a way that the industry will adopt it. No, I would say.
Please ask a question.
Yeah, thanks for the interesting talk. I do some work in the space of blockchain, and one of the things that I encounter when I talk to multiple organizations and to enable governance, there is often a pushback, and then they say that, hey, we can't disclose this information with X and Y because it's going to sort of reveal some sensitive information, or it's even going to violate some copyrights and whatnot. So can you comment on the utility of the governance, especially in the context of multi-organizational setup? Because if no one is willing to work together, then there is not much gain out of governance. It's sort of fancy keyword sitting there without offering anything substantial to all the entities. So yeah, can you comment on the utility of it?
I think it's a very nice question, because I do agree that we have here a balance between the way of the organization face the privacy and the control of our data, and the commitments that they have between them that should be public, at least known by both parties, let's say. So I would say that one way to approach that is to agree that both parties that involve the commitment, they agree on the events that are relevant for that commitment, that has implications on the commitments that we're doing. So if you agree on that, then you can limit the amount of data that you fed into the platform that you have, either a blockchain, accountability, or any other thing. So for example, a very lightweight event could be something like, every time I detect an issue, I will give you a ticket, and this ticket will be then have a time to ownership to be resolved, and then a time to be resolved. So the important event for me is when I give you the ticket, when it is owned, and when has been resolved. So these events can be traced down into the platform. And if, for example, something as easy as that, as lightweight as that, if you do it across the chain, and if I do a ticket to this organization, and this organization needs to rely on the ticket to other organization, the other ticket, then you can have a cross platform with blockchain that analyze that, and there's no problem with the data whatsoever. If you want to go in depth in more advanced commitments, like for example, data quality or things like that, in that case, you need to somehow define which is the metric that you're going to feed into the. But I think it's possible to create very lightweight approaches, but powerful for the 80% of the goals that we have. No?
Yeah. Thanks for that. Just wanted to add another comment. Following some of your slides, I was reminded of Open Source Software Foundation, which is a sort of an entity under Linux Foundation.
Yes.
So they are looking at supply chain security, and they are also looking at enabling problems and enabling accountability for software supply chain. So I think many of the points that you brought up sort of connects with those initiatives. So probably people may also want to check out OpenSSF, or in other words, Open Source Software Foundation. There are a lot of interesting ideas there as well, which are of same spirit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the reference.
Thank you for an excellent talk. It was really very good to see service governance and framework around this again. I had a question on the Open API spec, the extension that you were referring to. So I think it's very good to specify the limits and how you want it in a static form. But at some point, it has to get translated into a dynamic runtime system, because this is a static definition execution.
Yeah.
So how do you build that bridge between those static?
Well, that's again, it's very interesting question, because it raises some important issue here. I totally agree on what you described. I would say that there's two types of information. One is a little bit more static, the other one is more dynamic. In this extension, we were very conservative. We just wanted to at least just the typical information that you have in your pricing web for the APIs, at least that information that you have there that is static, or not that static, by the way, changes perhaps every month or depending on your business plan. But at least that information that has a low rhythm of change, you can have it. But there is definitely the other information is much more operational driven for your engine, elastic operation of your systems that you need to require. We in our case we believe we have a lot of implications. These extensions could be at the same time extended with other information like guarantees, dynamic metrics like, for example, response times, penalties, rewards, there's a lot of information that you could put into, and that could be very useful to guide the dynamics of the systems. But well, tell you, our experience was that the first time we approached the industry, the consortium of OpenAPI, we brought like a magnificent proposal with lots of features, with guarantees, with rewards, with whatever, and most of the vendors there or the practitioners said, okay, well, this is super complex. We don't use this, we don't use that, we don't another use that. So what we did was to create a common, say, what is the very bare minimum to at least have a starting point, and then you can create the traction to evolve the extension. But if you the people start to use, but you're definitely right that this is a very, very small approach towards a realistic dynamic system.
It's required. It's a good starting point. We definitely need that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
There was also a question here. Yes.
Thank you for your talk, and you give us an overview about the service governance, and there are three types of transforming function. And tell us, it's very detailed, and tell us how to consider the think about the service governance. So I have two questions about the first one is about there is a mention about the service capacity prediction. So can this prediction use AI models? And if we want to predict the service capacity, so we will be in way with the data privacy issues.
The last, can you repeat the last word?
The service capacity prediction.
Composition, capacity, service capacity. Okay, yeah. Well, that's definitely a very good point. Actually, capacity is something that when we approach to service capacity problem, we realize that we have very many different perspectives. You can have the service capacity perceived by the consumer, that he needs to know in order to take decisions about which service to choose, which model to use. And there's a lot of decision making for the consumer about the capacity that he expects from the provider. And there's the other perspective that is from inside the service provider. I have lots of commitments, I have lots of consumers, and I need to deal with my capacity the best I can. And I need to predict. But both consumer and provider should predict the capacity, but with different perspectives. So AI models, in our opinion, could really be a very nice way to have to help into the strategies in the short term for a better prediction. But there are, like, in our opinion, there are two types of predictions: more tactic predictions to do very immediate actions that you want to do based on what is happening, and long-term predictions that you have to say, okay, which is going to be my use in the following month? Should I create new reserve more infrastructure, no reserve? So in both cases, perhaps you need to do different approaches to how you use the AI models into long-term or short-term predictions. But it definitely it could be a very, very nice path to explore. We haven't done it at the moment. We are using more approaches related with, for example, constraint problems, constraint solution problems to analyze the capacity. But it could be very interesting to incorporate. We have it in the roadmap to incorporate which is the best approach of AI to the both scenarios.
Yes, it's dynamic environment, and the service dynamic.
Yeah.
So the second I want to ask about the growth of organization.
Yeah.
What was the policy? Policy.
Yes, well, the policy, it could be like a choreographed way of dealing with the cross organization. So there's a common policy and everybody adapt it. But perhaps sometimes it's not possible to have policies because the people doesn't agree or the organization doesn't agree on a common ground. So we need to put that address that in every organization independently. But at least they have to share all a common ground on the global metrics that they want to achieve, or if they are using, for example, AI systems, which is the traces that you're going to guarantee to request every time you give me an outcome where the AI was involved. I want also the traces, and that could be a very nice room for policies, because you could have accountability policies to describe this kind of requirements. And definitely is a nice approach. But as I was mentioning, I definitely think it should be very lightweight. If you want the industry to adopt it, it should be super easy to use the bare minimum. And as you request more things, you can complex a little bit, but it should be at the beginning super easy to use for very small common grounds. But I think you're right. That could be a good approach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the candidate.
Just the housekeeping of the day. Now we split in 3 sessions: tutorial, scientific session, and scientific session here. The coffee break will be at 11:30, because today we are moving later, more Italian time, let me say. So then there will be another technical session, lunch at 1:30. And we'll start at 3 with the panel. Before the panel, we will have a 1-minute presentation of the demo. After the panel coffee break, the demo session, and in parallel with the scientific session, the demo session will be in the room just in front of us. And then each of you can go to the party, walking or with the bus. Don't worry, the raining will stop at 5, so you can have a nice walk. And we see there at 7:30. We of the organization, so the red t-shirt, will leave you at 6 because we have to prepare a little bit for the party. So the demo you will visit yourself and then go to the party. Maybe some of Rome can help you in driving, but the street is very simple. And don't worry for the night, it's very safe when we get back late, walking, or we'll walk all together, or we'll take some taxis. So, but be safe, be quiet, that is a safe area. So let's go on. Thank you so much. Can you send me the slides? Yes, because we wanted to put the slides and the registration on the web, all the keynote, the panel this evening. Absolutely. To try to. So we'll have the frameworks for IoT mobile and smart environment. Thank you. Really good. Everything I did well.